All right, well, welcome everybody. This is the Thursday, April 9th joint meeting of the Brookline Planning Board and the Housing Advisory Board. We have, more items on the agenda than I thought.
It's actually a joint hearing.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I will not review the agenda given that I'm joining late. But I believe the first item is special town meeting one, Article 1. And I assume planning staff is going to do the introduction to this one.
That's correct.
Yes.
Is Meredith,
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Meredith Mooney, Economic Development Director. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight to present the Chestnut Hill Commercial Overlay District zoning. This is a topic that both the Planning Board and the Housing Advisory Board have discussed several times over the past couple of years as we've been working on the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study. This rezoning was a recommendation that emerged from that study work. Matt, would you like me to go straight into the presentation?
Actually, I think so. We do not have an item for matters not on the agenda, so I think we can go right into it.
Okay. Share screen. All right, confirming everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, I have a couple timelines, just sort of recounting when Planning Board and HAB, discussed these topics. So Planning Board, Mark Zarillo volunteered and served as the Planning Board's representative on the Community Advisory Group that had been advising staff as we worked our way through the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study process. And there are some photos here from a meeting in a box workshop that Mark facilitated with the Planning Board back in spring 2024 as we were kicking off the study process. Earlier this year, the Planning Board, as the rezoning and the design guideline proposal had taken more shape, they were presented to the Planning Board in January. There was a workshop in early February where Planning Board dug into some of the zoning parameters, the design guidelines, provided some feedback. And then in mid-February, planning staff returned to the Planning Board with an update about what modifications we had made to the zoning and were preparing to make to the design guidelines in response to feedback we'd received from the Planning Board in February. Housing Advisory Board back in December 2024, City Realty, which is the property owner of the largest property in the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study, referred to as the Chestnut Hill Office Park, began a conversation with the HAB about how they would go about fulfilling their inclusionary zoning requirements. A year later, City Realty returned to the HAB. There was a presentation discussion, and there was an agreement on how City Realty would fulfill their commitments under the inclusionary zoning bylaw, which was a contribution of a combination of payment in lieu as well as some on-site affordable units. And we can talk more about that later on in the presentation. And then in February, planning staff had a discussion with the Housing Advisory Board about the proposed height bonus associated with projects with 50% or greater affordable housing in one of the sub-districts in the commercial area. And we were looking for some feedback guidance on how to refine some of the parameters and the language in the zoning about that. And then we work with Jonathan Klein as a follow-up to that meeting in order to finalize the zoning language related to that height bonus for affordable housing. So this is my understanding of sort of objectives for this evening. Planning Board, there's the public hearing on the proposed zoning bylaw amendments for special town meeting 1, Article 1. There's also a public hearing related to the design guidelines that are a component or sort of a companion to the proposed zoning. And Housing Advisory Board also having a public hearing tonight on the zoning bylaw amendments. And then on April 22nd, there will be another public hearing regarding the companion warrant article to the zoning, which is an authorization for the select board to enter into an MOA and tax certainty agreement with City Realty. So I just wanted to pause and confirm with the chairs that those are correct characterizations of objectives for tonight.
Those are, I wanted to ask, there's been, as you all know, a flurry of information coming today. I've been at work, so I have not had a chance to read, frankly, any of it. I understand that there are some, I'll call them friendly amendments. There are also some fairly long amendments that may be discussed or presented here tonight. I don't know if the other planning board members feel like they've had enough time to vote on those amendments separate from voting on the warrant article as submitted to the warrant. But I'd be interested if any of you feel like we should try to get to a vote where we can on any of those, so that as the process continues, where we're in agreement with those, that at least that is carried forward. And I see Steve put his hand up. I'll start with you, Steve, just real quick.
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, as far as as affects the HAB, it seems to me a lot of the inclusionary zoning issues are in the MOA. There's technical language about how the payments are made, et cetera. So it looks like that's really going to be the topic primarily on April 22nd for a separate meeting. I have had some time to look at the flood of information that came in, and frankly, one of my concerns is how well coordinated everything is. I know there have been some amendment changes to the warrant article itself as a result of previous recent comments, and that's one of the things I want to talk about with respect to that. But as far as if we don't feel like we can get to a vote tonight because of all this late breaking stuff, it's worth mentioning, I don't know if everybody knows this, but warrant article, I guess 15, that has to do with 26 Pleasant Street has been withdrawn by the petitioner. So that we were going to talk about that, I think, on the 30th. So there would be more time on April 30th to talk about warrant article 1 if necessary.
Steve, just a minor correction, because that's the language that I've used with people, that has been withdrawn. And apparently the moderator has corrected us, and that it's not withdrawn. There's going to be, it will not be moved by the petitioner.
Okay.
There is always a chance that someone else could move, let's say, to refer it or something like that, or even move the motion. Very unlikely, but it could happen.
Yeah,
And so the planning board will have a hearing on April 30th on warrant article 16, but I do agree with you that it would be very brief, because probably last night, the land use committee of the advisory committee voted no action on warrant article 16. And I would imagine that the planning board would do that, or they might say they want to refer the article or something like that. But it shouldn't take very long, and therefore, we would have time to discuss this. I know that in speaking with Meredith today, that I think it is the land use committee, correct me if I'm wrong, of the advisory committee that's going to be taking up warrant article 1 on the 30th. And so it would be nice to do it, have the vote before then, the discussion before then. One of the things we could consider is that, as you know, next Thursday night, we are also having a public hearing, and there are 2 warrant articles on that night. But this article could be continued to that night, be done first, and then we could take up the other 2. If the other 2 don't get finished, those could be continued to April 30th. So that will be up to the planning board to decide how you want to do that at the end of the hearing tonight.
But just so I'm clear what Meredith put up there, we could vote on the article that was submitted to us that we've all had a chance to read, that may be amended going forward tonight, and then come back to perhaps review and vote on an amended article on the 30th. Is that
correct? Yes, you can vote on the main article, and then you can vote on just the amendments. What you just received, planning department just received, and also town council, Jonathan Simpson has his hand up. So we should really turn to him, but we really do need to give other staff an opportunity to, perhaps make some suggestions and clarify things for the planning board.
Okay, I'm going to let Jonathan have the floor for a second.
I just wanted to make a quick clarification as to the timing. We're going before the land use subcommittee next Monday night. The meeting on the 30th is in front of the full AC.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that.
Any other members of the planning board have anything to add? I mean, I think what we'd like to do is get to a vote on the submitted article that we've had time to review and then plan to come back unless anyone feels strongly otherwise. Doesn't mean we won't have constituents and folks offer their thoughts tonight with the expectation that those are coming, but it would potentially mean we'll have two different times to vote on the base article and then the amended article later. Blair.
I'd just like to say that I think that's a good intent, but maybe we should reserve that to the end of the discussion about whether in fact we want to have a vote tonight.
That's fair. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, because of the joint hearing, any members of the HAB feel differently either way? All right, if not, we'll keep going. Thank you, Meredith, for giving us the pause.
I appreciate the discussion. I would just offer the Economic Development Advisory Board held their public hearing on Monday. And the way they proceeded with their vote was they voted on the article as presented and then also endorsed separately a set of friendly amendments that we presented, and that way I was going to walk you through this evening. So for whatever that's worth, I don't know if that format might be helpful for the planning board.
That would, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So next slide. So overview of tonight's presentation. I wanted to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm aware of the fact that both of these boards have a certain degree of familiarity with the zoning proposal at this point. So I was going to provide sort of overview of the key components of the zoning, trying to keep it more high level. I'll come back to it as people have specific questions about different aspects of the zoning. Then I was going to try to do my best to summarize or at least provide some framework as people go back and review all of the feedback documents that were submitted earlier today and do a summary of the recent proposed and requested zoning changes, and then very briefly talk about the design guidelines. So big picture objectives with the study work and with the overlay district. So we are looking to encourage commercial development, particularly high tax generating uses within the Chestnut Hill commercial area that will help raise revenue for the town, improve the Chestnut Hill commercial area, and to promote mixed use development, which is really a vehicle for advancing the town's housing and commercial development goals simultaneously. The vision for the Chestnut Hill commercial area is to foster a vibrant, dense, walkable, mixed-use neighborhood with high tax generating commercial uses. And these are some renderings that you'll see later on in the presentation as well, that Sasaki, who we worked with to develop the design guidelines, created, reflecting the zoning parameters. So the objective for the overlay zoning is we're really trying to establish a clear planning framework for this area that supports economic development, mixed use, improves the public realm, and that is carefully reviewed through the existing design review and special permit processes. So study origins go back to the 2005 comprehensive plan. It identified creating a district plan for Chestnut Hill as a priority. It identified opportunities for incentivizing more mixed use to advance commercial development goals, add additional housing along this area. Particularly talked about amending the Office 2.0 zoning, which governs the Chestnut Hill Office Park site. And in general, sort of the discussion about this area in Chestnut Hill, there was an acknowledgement, even back in 2005, that the Chestnut Hill commercial area really just wasn't living up to its potential in terms of vibrancy or in contributing to the town's commercial tax base. This is an overview of the Chestnut Hill commercial area study process. Talked earlier about kicked off in spring 2024. We worked with the community advisory group, which Mark was the planning board's representative on, that provided guidance direction to staff as we made our way through this process. It was also the forum in which we received public comment and feedback. The Economic Development Advisory Board established an ad hoc subcommittee to help support staff in providing some additional technical consulting resources and developing aspects of the zoning to promote commercial development, but then to also make sure that we are including adequate protections for the town, in the midst of commercial development we were looking to incentivize. We regularly updated the select board. We had several conversations with the Housing Advisory Board throughout this process. I think we had 2 or 3 meetings with the planning board. in addition to the workshop initially, and we are now discussing the zoning proposal that's under consideration for Springtown meeting. So just a quick overview of the technical expertise and analysis that we drew from as part of the study work. So we did work with RKG Associates on real estate analysis. They provided a market analysis, also developed a fiscal impact model that we could input different development scenarios into to make sure that the zoning parameters we were proposing aligned with the goals of incentivizing significant net new commercial tax growth, even though we were talking about mixed use development. So EDAB subcommittee provided additional financial feasibility analysis and policy input. And then local developers also participated in community advisory group discussions, economic development advisory board subcommittee discussions to provide input on unique considerations regarding their properties and factors they were concerned about in terms of implications for financial feasibility. And then finally, we worked with Sasaki to develop the design guidelines, and they also provided some additional consulting feedback in terms of the zoning, because there was some push and pull as we were refining the design guidelines with the zoning. So I did just want to underscore the key community issues that were talked about a lot throughout the community advisory group process, the study process. So there's a lot of interest in really fostering successful ground floor retail in this area. Neighbors talk about they don't want to have to cross Route 9 in order to go to a coffee shop or a restaurant. They would really like to be able to spend their dollars in Brookline and have easier access by walking or being able to drive a shorter distance in order to patronize local businesses. There's particularly an interest in the types of businesses that kind of foster more community, like restaurants, coffee shops, bookstores. Preserving the character of Heath Street was very important. If you've had the opportunity to walk around the Chestnut Hill commercial area, there's a dramatic difference between Boylston Street and then as you make your way towards Heath Street, just in terms of the character, the quality of that experience from a pedestrian perspective. So there was a lot of interest in, trying to preserve Heath Street, shelter it from additional vehicular traffic and noise and other impacts that could be associated with more redevelopment in this area. Height and density were really the leading primary issue that we heard a lot from the neighbors and community about. There were a lot of concerns about the impacts of height and density, particularly given the heights that we were talking about, which we think were important for the economic viability of redevelopment under the zoning. Pedestrian experience, multimodal safety, there were over the past few years or several years, there have been 2 pedestrian deaths along Route 9 in the study area or just beyond the study area. And as we're looking to really foster redevelopment in this area, we want people to be able to go back and forth comfortably across Route 9. And so there's a lot of discussion about, how are we going to be able to improve the pedestrian experience and make it a safer area and make it feel like a safer, more enjoyable area to move through and around. And then the concerns about traffic impacts as we're upzoning this area that is going to come with additional trip generation. How will the existing infrastructure be able to absorb that? So this is a map of the existing zoning. You see it's a combination of the Office 2.0 over at the western edge here. This is the border with Newton. It sort of runs along this portion of the study area. And then there's the General 2.0. General 1.0, and then a mix of multifamily, and there are some 2-family districts as well. This is a quote from one of the property owners in the study area, John Salvatore from Salvatore Capital Properties. He recently submitted a letter expressing support for the rezoning, but I did want to include this quote just because I think it underscores what we're trying to address in creating this overlay zoning is sort of an alternative development pathway for property owners. It really speaks to the fact that the current zoning does not provide any incentive for property owners to pursue meaningful redevelopment or reinvestment in their properties. Existing uses, the Chestnut Hill Office Park, exclusively zoned for office use. In the gray, you see the surface parking lots, of which there are several throughout the study area. And then along Boylston, you see more commercial retail uses. And then along Heath Street are more residential uses. So this is just a quick overview. If you haven't had the opportunity to walk around the study area, I wanted to provide just some snapshots of different corners. of the Chestnut Hill commercial area. This is a part of town that has seen a lot of 40B activity recently. You see the 40B under construction at 1180 here at the corner of Boylston and Hammond Street. And then there's also another 40B that received its comprehensive permit and it's under litigation, but it's the Heath and Sheaf development, which would be here at the Central Cleaner site, and that's on the corner of Hammond and Heath Street. And some photos of Boylston Street showing variation in sidewalk conditions, surface parking lot. There are several of those throughout the area. And these are the 2 3-family homes in the northernmost part of the district along Hammond Street near the entrance to the street shopping center. So here we have the sort of interior of the study area. This is Sheep Street. You see the 1180 development in the corner here. You see sort of the contrast in the recent 40B development against the existing conditions of the 2-family homes. In the CHC4 subdistrict, the westernmost subdistrict, a lot of that is bordered by the Holy Hood Cemetery. Here you have the Senior Living Center on the corner of Heath and Tully. This is a perspective from Tully Street looking towards the street across Route 9. And then this is the backside of the Chestnut Hill Office Park along Heath Street. And then there are, I think right now people characterize this area as being a lot more suburban in nature. It does have good public transit connections. This is one of the bus stops for the Route 90 bus, I believe. And then
60.
oh, sorry. Thank you, Blair. The Route 60 bus. There are 2 stops heading inbound and then 1 stop at the street outbound within the study area. And there's also in the northern area, it's within a 5-minute walking distance of the Chestnut Hill T-stop on the Green Line. So I did want to note that it was talked about in the comprehensive plan. This is something as economic development staff, I've been hearing the Economic Development Advisory Board talk about for many, many years. A unique opportunity within the study area is the Chestnut Hill Office Park at 1280 to 1330 Boylston Street. This is sort of what we consider the remaining sites that are sort of the town's best remaining opportunities for development at a scale that would support a significant amount of commercial development that would really help move the needle in terms of growing the town's commercial tax base. So those sites are the Stop and Shop site along Harvard Street, the TJ Maxx along Harvard Street, headed towards Brighton. And then both of these sites are significantly smaller than the Chestnut Hill Office Park, which is over 5 acres. So the zoning it proposes 4 sub-districts that reflect, sort of what we think the development opportunities are that we think are appropriate based on, adjacencies to other parts of the neighboring districts. So on the western side, there are 2 economic development, promoting commercial development, very important part of the zoning policy. Within the zoning proposal, there are 2 commercial-oriented sub-districts, and those are the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area 4 and the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area 3 here. The 4.0 sub-district, the 4 and the 3 are references to the proposed maximum FARs there. So the 4.0 sub-district has 2 distinct blocks. There's the west block and the east block. And then on the eastern portion of the study area, you have the proposed neighborhood mixed use sub-district. And then on the north side, there's one sub-district to the north of Boylston Street, and this is the transit-oriented mixed use district. And the Chestnut Hill T-stop is about a 5-minute walk in this direction up Hammond Street. These are the proposed maximum heights across the district. And I'll point out areas where we've incorporated planning board feedback. So there was, as we talked about, neighborhood concerns regarding height and density are leading concerns. So there are a lot of elements in the zoning where we've really tried to create buffers and transitions along this western edge and related to other residential districts here. So at the western edge, your maximum height of 88 feet, about 7 stories. And then within the sort of central part of the 4.0 blocks, heights can be up to 12 stories and 14 with the height bonus, which could be achieved through so the base zoning in the 4.0 height maximum is 12 stories if developers include minimum 51% commercial as part of their development proposals. If the commercial accounts for 60% or more of the square footage in the project, they'd be eligible for the height bonus of 14 stories. And based on planning board feedback, we did create sort of a buffer here where there's a maximum 88 height within 30 feet of Tully Street. And then similarly on the east side of the 4.0, we transitioned to maximum 88-foot height along Holly Lane, 7-story height in the 3.0 sub-district. And then the neighborhood mixed use has a standard height of 4 stories, but you could go up to 6 stories for hotel use, or if your project includes 50% or greater of affordable housing. 50% or greater of the units are affordable. And then in the northern portion with the transit-oriented sub-district, you have a height of 7 stories. So you're kind of creating some consistency around the intersection of Hammond and Boylston here. And then it steps down to maximum of 75 feet as you move north towards Hammond Street. And this is the zoning envelope from a different perspective. Setback requirements, another piece of feedback from the planning board that we incorporated. So originally, earlier this year, we had proposed I believe it was 5-foot minimum setback, and feedback from the planning board is that you felt it was important along Boylston Street, Tully and Holly Lane, that setback be a minimum of 10 feet. So we did incorporate that to account for more opportunities for tree planting, and then along Boylston Street, trying to sort of create more of a boulevard effect and some balance in comparison to the street across the street. And then in terms of other elements of the zoning that are really trying to address the neighborhood concerns regarding the impacts of height and density, there's a 40-foot minimum setback along the western side here, 25 feet along Heath Street, in order to really address those concerns about preserving the character of Heath Street. This is an overview of the zoning components. I'm not going to go into all of these, but I did just want to point out some of the newer zoning policy tools that we've implemented here. In terms of being able to utilize the overlay zoning, the requirement for a minimum commercial use is a new tool that we've been using. There have been other overlay zones that were very more specific in terms of the types of commercial uses, like a hotel of a certain size, for example. But I think creating this policy about, more broadly, minimum 51% commercial is a new tool that we're utilizing here. And then the tree canopy requirements, this is a newer requirement that we've included in more recent zoning overlays that we're carrying through here. And then I did want to note that the infrastructure improvements, as part of the Chestnut Hill commercial area study, we did undertake a transportation study to do an analysis of the existing conditions, develop some concepts about what improvements would be needed, and within the context of the rezoning, and then did some capacity testing for the existing infrastructure. And just given that analysis and our understanding of the extent of the needs that in terms of improving, the roadways, sidewalks within this area, we did increase the minimum mitigation payment from previous overlay zones. We doubled it for this. In other overlay districts, it was a minimum 1% of the hard construction costs. And for this overlay zoning, developers will be required to contribute 2% of hard construction costs that we'll be able to invest in transportation infrastructure improvements. So just very quickly, the zoning profiles, starting on the eastern edge of the study area, the Chestnut Hill neighborhood mixed use areas, these 2 blocks on the easternmost edge. So it's focused on, we're anticipating ground floor commercial uses with residential above, and the bonus height, so standard height of 4 stories, bonus height up to 6 if the proposals include at least 50% affordable units or a hotel use. And I did want to underscore that the affordable housing incentive was inspired by, key conclusions in the Affordable Housing Overlay District Subcommittee's report and recommendations. And, we're looking to sort of pilot that recommendation within the neighborhood mixed use subdistrict. transit-oriented, sort of intermediate density, and different zoning components related to, the proximity to transit. So lower vehicle parking requirements, higher bike parking requirements. We're creating sort of the form-based zoning light, doesn't have the FAR requirement. So the commercial 3.0 is the one block along Boylston Street that, just given its visibility on Boylston Street, we think that this would be an appropriate commercial use. So this also has the minimum 51% commercial requirement in order to use the overlay zoning. And in terms of the heightened density, it's sort of a transition between the larger campus style development in the 4.0 and the lower districts on the eastern edge. The Chestnut Hill 4.0 sub-district, this is really what we consider the area for high impact economic development potential. So we're allowing for larger, denser campus style development in exchange for increased commercial activity as part of the development proposals, significant open space requirements, and significant tree canopy requirements as well. And bonus height for projects with at least 60% commercial use. This is a rendering from of the 4.0 from the Heath Street perspective. So I can come back to this slide, but we did incorporate several different strategies to really hone in on creating incentives for significant net new commercial tax growth. What I will say is, like, we're looking to incentivize development and really encourage developers to maximize the commercial components of their mixed use projects. But we really had to balance, there's a threshold where we can go from, sort of responsibly looking to challenge developers to maximize that commercial space. And then there's a threshold where if you exceed that, the risk is that you're, making it less likely that you're ever going to have a developer in a market cycle that are going to be able to achieve those commercial requirements. So we've had to try to appropriately balance the requirements based on, the goals to incentivize development. We've already talked about the minimum commercial requirements. Within that minimum commercial requirement and the thresholds of 51% and 60%, we have created sort of a formula where we provide incentives for certain types of commercial uses that we view as preferable and more advantageous from a tax generation perspective. So we're really looking to prioritize hotel, event and conference facilities, research and development labs, and medical office uses. And then in recognition of, this community preference and desire for really healthy ground floor retail, we've also created incentives for smaller scale retail of 2,500 square feet or less, and larger retail establishments up to 10,000 square feet. I can come back to why we feel those uses are particularly beneficial from a tax generation standpoint, if you'd like. But moving on, one of the other requirements is the ground floor commercial requirement. This is something that exists in other parts of our zoning for other commercial districts. So there's the requirement that 60% of the ground floor commercial, 60% of the ground floor is of commercial use. But you see that we've really tried to concentrate where we're absolutely adamant there must be ground floor retail, and where other parts of the district where it would be nice to have, but ultimately, we would be willing to provide a waiver to developers if they feel that they're not going to be able to have ground floor retail successful along Holly, Tully, Sheaf Street, and some of the peripheries of the study area. So Heath Street is entirely exempt from that ground floor commercial requirement. This is just an overview of all of the incentives that we've talked about in terms of the bonuses and the commercial requirements. And I will pause there to see if there are any questions or slides that people would like me to go back to before I dive into the next section, where I'm trying to summarize recent changes.
Anyone on either of the boards? Onward.
Okay. So since the planning board very recently was reviewing the zoning, the design guidelines, there have been some changes even since the last time you would have reviewed the zoning back in February. So you might have noticed that the boundaries of the overlay district shifted. Let me go back to, so previously we had the neighborhood mixed use and this block had extended all the way to Dunster Road. We did receive some community feedback and did some, additional consideration at the staff level. Several of these properties here are on the National Historic Register, and the base zoning aligns much more with sort of preserving those historical architectural assets. So there's an existing commercial use here. So we ended up excluding those properties from the neighborhood mixed use subdistrict and ended the boundary right at XOXO Sushi Bar is where the boundary is now. So there was that revision to the eastern portion of the study boundary. There was also, as the select board was considering whether or not to move the zoning proposal forward for town meeting consideration, one of the property owners, Growth Companies, which owns a lot of the property, they own the Tully Street lot within the 4.0, and then on the opposite block, on the eastern block of the 4.0, they own a lot of those properties as well. They expressed some serious concerns about the current overlay zoning, and they really felt that there were certain aspects of it that would exclude them from utilizing the overlay zoning. So they expressed it to the select board, and we worked with them and the Economic Development Advisory Board to try to accommodate them before we finalized the zoning and submitted it for the special town meeting. So I have an overview of what those changes were. I don't have to go into too much detail. We can also come back to that. So this is an overview of the requests that were made back in March before the select board executed the special town meeting warrant. These were their requests. These are the subsequent set of requests that we received after the zoning was filed for town meeting. So some of their requests were already contemplated in the zoning, and so it was just a clarification issue. And then there were a handful of other amendments that we did end up incorporating into the zoning that were relatively minor in terms of providing some flexibility in terms of the setbacks along Heath Street and the eastern block of the 4.0, and they wanted some flexibility for lower floor-to-floor heights for parking structures. We were able to accommodate those requests. And then the most significant request was that they wanted some flexibility in terms of one of the kind of core requirements or protections we had built into the zoning in instances where developers wanted to do phase development, where they would front load the residential development and then follow through with the commercial piece to meet the minimum 51% or 60% commercial requirement. And we'd structured this in such a way where they'd kind of have to do that in quick succession. Because once the town issues the certificate of occupancy for the residential building built first, we lose a lot of our leverage to make sure that the developer follows through on their commitments to build the commercial square footage. So we ended up creating sort of a section where, through an agreement with the select board, a developer could have up to 5 years to follow through on meeting their minimum commercial requirement. I think that this was a good compromise and is beneficial because it creates sort of a placeholder where the town has the opportunity to potentially initiate a conversation about negotiating an MOA and tax certainty with Growth Companies or another property owner in the study area, once they're ready to move forward with development, but need this flexibility. And then in terms of this other set of requests, I think there was just really more requesting specificity regarding their properties or the properties that they're hoping to assemble. At the staff level, we felt like these were all adequately addressed in the zoning, and fell within the scope of the flexibility to reduce setback requirements by special permit. And then there was one request that they had regarding modifications to the step back requirements. Growth Company's proposal involves 2 separate buildings. It's more of like infill style of development, and it's at a lower scale. It's not at the 12-story. They're talking about 4 to 6 story buildings, which the step back requirements don't really contemplate in the 4.0. So this is, well, if we think this is a reasonable request, we would be happy to continue working with them and preparing a zoning amendment at some point in the future. But for the purpose of this town meeting discussion, those were ruled out of scope. So friendly amendments that we presented to EDAB last night, and that I'm happy to walk through sort of a track changes version of the zoning if you just wanted to feel a little bit more confident about where these proposed amendments live in the zoning. I'm happy to do that. So there was a proposed change in terms of the requirements for meeting the minimum commercial use requirements if they're in a phased development scenario. We had been thinking about the phased development under this rezoning more in the context of what I just described, where developers would want to front load residential development and then follow through with the commercial. However, it's possible that they might front load the commercial and then follow through with the residential later. And the way we had written the commercial requirements, we were concerned that that might create some issues in that unlikely scenario where they follow up with the residential development later. So we just tweaked the wording a bit to make sure that we are accommodating that scenario. There was kind of a Scrivener's error. There was a reference to effective commercial ratio, which is just not the correct term. So we would like to revise that. And then most significantly, Section 15 and the tree canopy requirements. We had, after our conversation with the planning board, there was a lot of discussion about, how developers, more specifically in like the NMU and some of the block scale sub-districts, how they were going to be able to meet the tree canopy requirements. And sort of inspired by that feedback, we went back and were viewing the tree canopy requirements in other zoning overlay districts and then tried to make some modifications to reflect sort of the existing format from tree canopy requirements and other zoning overlays. And I think we overcorrected and ended up creating too much flexibility for developers to do payment in lieu for a portion of their tree canopy requirements. And I think we had gotten feedback from various corners, from the neighbors, from even members of the Economic Development Advisory Board, that this was too much flexibility and the full tree canopy requirements on site is very important. So as a result, we are proposing the friendly amendment of correcting that error and making the specification that the tree canopy be provided at ground level and that we're removing the option for partial payment in lieu for projects greater than 1 acre. I will pause there just to see if there are any questions about the friendly amendments.
I did just recalling that came up in that work session in early February. I forget which of the planning board members made the suggestion, but it was to address a perceived issue with achieving the tree canopy requirement on site. So you're saying you were able to go back and do some math and figured out that it is achievable.
I think if I could step in, Meredith, I think there are a couple of things here. One, in the February 4th workshop with the planning board, I believe it was Mark Cirillo who was concerned about the very stringent on-site tree canopy requirements. That's like a percentage. And so we took that to heart and said in like the smaller neighborhood, the NMU districts, we expanded the provisions, alternative provisions that include low impact development, payment into the tree fund for public shade trees, et cetera. There was some concern about losing some of the, conversely, in the CH4, which is the campus style at the western end, folks there wanted the more stringent requirements and didn't want those low impact development alternatives. So we were able to do both. We were able to meet what Mark had suggested for the lower neighborhood scale district, those alternative provisions. And then in the larger campus style, we retain the on-site tree canopy requirement. Does that answer your question, Matt?
It does. I mean, I don't remember exactly the detail. I thought it was given the setbacks, there wasn't physically enough space to plant enough trees to achieve that. And so
that could be a concern. So that's why we have alternatives in the neighborhood district, district for payment into a tree mitigation fund, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah, but I trust the professionals on this. Steve, have you hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the planning board suggesting the payment in lieu of, but I'm glad it's out. But in reviewing some of the materials for tonight, I could swear in the draft planning board report, there's still reference to the payment in lieu. And I can't find it right now, but I think that it does need to be removed from some of the materials representing the current status of things.
I'll double check that, Steve. That is, we are correctly characterizing the NMU district. That does allow you to pay into the tree fund. I will make sure that we don't refer to that when we speak of the CH4, the campus
Yeah.
style district.
I don't know where I got this, but I had this, it was like number 8 in a list of things, but that's, I don't see that list. Oh yeah, it is. I'm sorry. It's on page 3 of the planning board report under tree canopy, open space and sustainability. Item 8 offers provisions for public shade tree plantings and contributions to the town's tree fund. So I think that just needs to.
Well, okay, we'll just say that that's restricted to the NMU only.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
All right. Thank you. That's it.
thank you.
Any other members of the board want to say anything? Otherwise, we'll keep going. Okay. Carry on again. Thank you, Meredith.
Hey. Let me just orient myself to where, so you also received a comment letter or a set of proposed amendments from Dick Benka. And we did have the opportunity to review these at the staff level and have some thoughts that we'd be happy to share with the planning board. There are certainly some amendments here that we think are very strong and beneficial and add to the zoning that we're prepared to adopt as friendly amendments. So I'm happy to go through that. I think it would be in the format of like scrolling through a Word document. So I don't know if you want me to finish the slide deck presentation and then circle back to that. But the other, I know that you received some comment letters, so just to provide a quick overview and some context for some of the statements you've received from property owners for quick reference. So growth companies are the properties here in this pink color. The amendments we were just talking about are specific to these properties, and then their development concept actually involves this portion of Heath Street, which includes several properties. They're in the process of assembling them, but they do not currently control or own those properties. There's also a letter of support for the zoning from Salvatore Capital Partners, quoted earlier in the presentation. That's this green properties here. And then Elias Pachuchis from Chestnut Hill Realty Ventures also submitted a proposal, as I mentioned before, their 40B proposal for Heath and Sheaf received his comprehensive permit, is under litigation, but he, expressed interest in sort of the outcome of the overlay zoning and what alternatives might be available for their property. And then across the street, everyone, I'm assuming, is familiar with the Street Shopping Center, which is owned by WS Development. They also own the light green property here, which is in Brookline. So this includes the parking lot for the Star Market, and they own 2 of the 2 or 3 family brick homes that we saw in the earlier photos from the existing condition slides. So they had recently submitted a letter on Monday opposing the zoning and expressing serious concerns about the minimum parking requirements, particularly for the CHC Ford subdistrict. And their concern is that they don't feel the minimum parking requirements are adequate. There's the potential that a proposal could be, very underparked from their perspective, and as a result, they think that there's a greater likelihood for people to park in their, surface parking, and they're concerned about the potential impacts to their tenants and their business model. So just to provide some context as people are sorting through the comment letters they received this evening. And then the design guidelines, there was a workshop with the planning board back in February, received some great feedback. We did incorporate some of the guidance. There was interest in having a section of the design guidelines specifically to address large site development, so which we're defining as greater than 2 acres, just to give the planning board sort of a more concrete point of reference in reviewing those proposals. And this is an overview of the different aspects of the design guidelines. And then not part of the design guidelines, but something that was presented and has been brought up would be the potential shadow impacts of the zoning envelope. So you reviewed that information as well. And then the town protections, this is related to the warrant article, special town meeting warrant article 2, so I won't go into that. But actually, sorry, for the benefit of the HAB members, I will just very quickly flip to, so City Realty's redevelopment proposal, some photos here. This is an overview of anticipated economic development impact from City Realty's proposal, estimated 5.6 million in net new tax growth, benefits package totaling in the neighborhood of 24 million. And the affordable housing, in terms of the MOA and meeting their inclusionary zoning requirements, is 10.93 million to the Affordable Housing Trust as a cash in lieu payment for their condos that are proposed as part of their hotel condo building A proposal, and an estimated 21 on-site affordable units for their residential building on the western edge of their property in the study area. So if it would be helpful, I'm happy to go through sort of track changes reflecting some of the proposed amendments that Dick Benka had recommended, but I don't know if you'd like me to pause here for now.
Yeah, as you go through that, I'm assuming then that there are some that are not going to be considered friendly. So I don't know if it's better to look at Dick's document as a document and then see which we've applied. Again, I haven't had a chance to read it because I've been at work. So not knowing what's in it, I guess, Meredith, I'd take your guidance on what you think the right sequence is. Go through the stuff you're willing to sort of bring in as friendly amendments, or stop. I'm assuming Dick will be here and will want to present his amendments separately, but you let me know, because you apparently were having some conversations today.
Sure. I'm happy to walk through them, but if yeah, I will just pull up share screen.
While she's doing that, I did have a chance to look at them. And I know Dick often is looking for ways in which developers can game the system, within our zoning. And I think this set of amendments was a little bit different. I think he was actually catching little areas of that might not have been clear. So for the most part, I thought they were pretty modest, and most of them pretty useful. I'm not sure which ones you feel don't
Yeah, I
work.
would agree. I would agree completely. I had a chance to go through them myself, and I would echo that. Most of it has to do with setbacks related to the typical building heights that would be allowed in certain specific areas, and that the setbacks would be more advantageous as he outlined them. And it was, I think, a good, I guess you call it, do you call it kind uh, or friendly suggestions in amendments. I would agree with that completely, what Steve said.
I'm not saying that we should accept them carte blanche. I mean, Meredith may have looked at them more carefully, but I just gave him a quick read. I only saw them today, but so I think you should go through them, I guess.
See that then?
I mean,
Right.
there's also the matter of Janice Kahn's quote consensus amendment, which only arrived this afternoon. I don't know what to say about that, or whether we even should be talking about it.
Okay, well, we will walk through Dick Benka's proposed amendments, which I really appreciate. They are very detailed, very thoughtful. So this is a very helpfully, Dick overlaid his proposed amendments with our friendly amendments document as track changes. So
Are we
I'll
able
point
to
out.
zoom in to like make it a
Oh,
one?
yeah, sorry. Thank you. Nope, wrong direction. Nope.
There we
There
go.
we go. Okay, no. All right. Okay. So, scrolling ahead. So there was an existing section of the zoning where we tried to say, we have this minimum in terms of commercial requirements. This was specific to the commercial districts, and there was language in there saying that, you must maintain these commercial uses for the life of the building. And I think in friendly amendment, so Dick has also applied that to the ground floor minimum commercial use requirements. So this proposed edit addresses that. In terms of complying with the minimum commercial use requirements, just making sure that they're maintained. So this language is all sort of along the same theme. And Dick and I had a conversation about this before the meeting, but
You missed a friendly amendment that was right after it.
was the satisfactory?
No, both in and to through.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So this was one of the amendments that I had talked about to make sure that we were covering scenarios in which developers would front load the commercial development and follow through with the residential towards in the later phases of that. So there was this, one of the key protections, which was a policy that we developed with a lot of input from the Economic Development Advisory Board Subcommittee, was, in the scenarios where it's phased development, developer wants to front load the residential development, and then follow through with another building that would help them meet the minimum 51% commercial or the bonus requirement. In those instances, we would kind of hold the certificate of occupancy for the residential building hostage until they could demonstrate that they have obtained financing for the commercial building as well as broken ground on the commercial building. And I believe George Cole and Ken Lewis are here tonight from the EDAP subcommittee and would be able to provide some additional context background about why we felt that was an appropriate balance in terms of providing a certain level of flexibility to developers, but also providing the town the protection and level of assurance that they were going to follow through on their minimum commercial requirement. So I think what Dick is proposing here is that the commercial building needs to be weather tight. Meaning that it needs to be that much farther along in terms of the development before they're able to get their certificate of occupancy for the residential. I think just given the amount of consideration discussion that has gone into the way we've structured this existing requirement, in the sense that from, EDAP subcommittee members, that this provides an adequate amount of protection for the town, we're not inclined to adopt these as friendly amendments. And I don't know if it would be helpful for, George Cole or Ken to talk more about that, if that would be helpful to the planning board, or I can move on.
Meredith, did you say that adopted as friendly or as not friendly? The last
Not friendly. So the amendments
Okay.
that we're inclined to incorporate as friendly amendments are strike through and highlighted. So that would include all of these weather tight proposed amendments.
You're saying you're not agreeing to that. You think the breaking ground is adequate as discussed.
It's the breaking ground and the evidence of financing. Yeah.
No
Do
objection.
you want,
Not the
do you want to discuss these now, or do you want to circle back to these? Let go through and then come back to the ones that are in disagreement.
I'm inclined to continue forward and potentially vote.
I
vote
agree.
yes with the accepted friendly amendments and assume that the others either are going to take some debate and or further consideration. I don't see us accepting what staff currently sees as a not friendly amendment into the language we're going to vote on tonight, but happy, Dick, to have your thoughts when we continue on those for sure.
That's great. And I will mute myself then.
Thank you.
Okay, so continuing on, again, added some clarifying language in terms of the maintenance of the required commercial uses. This is I think a helpful edit where Dick did a good job of sort of clarifying what the intent was of this sentence that was struck here. So I would consider that a friendly amendment. Yes.
Meredith, could I actually ask you to highlight that one as not included for tonight, because there's some discussion within the staff about that amendment to still be resolved.
This, Michael?
Yeah, just that sentence. The strikeout is friendly, but the addition is under discussion.
Okay.
Was the highlight a replacement for what was stricken out?
Mhm.
That was its intention. The question that's under debate is whether or not that sentence is necessary or redundant.
Should we unstrike then that sentence that's not highlighted?
No, that's actually agreed that that sentence doesn't belong.
Okay, I can't actually read it.
So this provision does not apply to required ground floor commercial uses. So we are comfortable with striking this. And what Michael is saying that
it.
he feels that this might be redundant.
Okay, sorry. I thought the highlighted was the swap. Once you took out that, you needed to put something else reworded back in, but I get what
Yeah.
you're saying. Okay.
Okay. This is one of the existing friendly amendments where we're replacing the, effective commercial ratio with the correct term. Scrolling ahead. Dick had raised the question about for allowed accessory uses, do we want to permit short-term rentals? From the staff perspective, we felt short-term rental, would be an appropriate use as an accessory use in this area. Maria had pointed out proximity to the LMA hospitals. That being said, certainly open to more discussion about this. Wouldn't be prepared to accept this as a friendly amendment, but open to further discussion.
I'm sorry, on that one, do we have a definition in zoning for what that means? What short term is?
Yes, it is. It is in the zoning already, so we're not redefining it here.
Okay.
So in terms of floor area ratio, we've applied FAR maximums to the commercial districts. And there's a bonus in the 3.0 in the event that they put, 90% of their parking below ground, they would be eligible for a 4.0 FAR bonus. For the NMU and the transit-oriented subdistricts, those are sort of what we're describing as form-based light zoning, and we have not applied FAR to that. And so Dick had sort of raised the question about whether a limit should be applied, and from the staff perspective, we wouldn't be interested in adopting that as an amendment. And then there's a lot of requested amendments in terms of the setback requirements. And I might ask Marie to help me out with this first section of.
Right. So the what Dick had recommended was that where you see in the NMU, there is that entire block, half of it would be the NMU, and the other half, that is the easternmost to Dunster, would be the National Register district. There, it's a two-family district. We have a 10-foot setback between that easternmost boundary of the NMU to that T5. And that 10-foot setback is at the ground level. But what you don't see here is that separate chart where you have at floor 3 and 4, you have an additional 10-foot setback. So you're creating these volumes that are comparable to what you might see in that two-family district. So it's a cumulative 20-foot setback above floors 3 and 4, if that makes sense. So rather than putting all of that 20-foot setback at the ground level and then having another step back at the 3rd or 4th level, that's kind of like 30 feet. That could really make, a building, not viable. So we, in the spirit of what Dick is getting at, we're just allowing, we're carving out a 3 or 4 story volume, which is comparable in height. It could be like a 35-foot tall or 45-foot tall volume, comparable to what you see in the T district, which is a max height of 35 feet. it's easier to see diagrams, I will admit. That's kind of like why I like to see like a little diagram, but you'll just have to look at the building step backs chart and the building setbacks chart to understand what I mean by that cumulative 20 feet. We just distributed at the ground level and at the upper floors.
Thank you, Maria. And then Dick had also recommended that on the southwestern border of the district, where we had the minimum 25-foot setback, that be increased to 40 feet, which aligns with what we have on the western border. So we would be willing to adopt that as a friendly amendment. We had a conversation with City Realty, and they feel that they're able to work with that adjustment. So we are comfortable incorporating that. And then in terms of the sort of introductory section here in the setbacks portion of the zoning, I think Dick had pointed out that the overlay zoning is silent on sort of internal setbacks. A lot of the setback requirements are in reference to points within the zoning district or streets. And so there was a question about, the extent to which the internal setbacks would default to the base zoning, which we did think was a very helpful question and point. So I think what we are proposing, and I think we will still need to go back and get a scope ruling from the moderator on this, is a statement that the minimum side yard setbacks for the underlying zoning district would be applicable to internal side lot lines within all of the sub-districts minus the CHC4, where we've already established some setback requirements, but those could be reduced by special permit.
What about rear lot lines in this situation?
So rear lot lines, there's probably a lot of these lots go from one street to another, or for them to be viable, they would need to be assembled. So, we can take a look at that if you think that maybe there would be back-to-back buildings.
I mean, we could see this just by looking at the site, but it seems to me there may actually be some rear lot lines in some of these parcels that are not street to street.
Okay, we can take a look at that. I just think that when you get to the NMU, the districts, the block itself is like 100 feet deep. So you're probably going to need like a through lot in order to make a building viable.
I'm thinking more about CHC3.
Okay. We can take a look at that with you, and maybe that can be part of the separate amendments. But I think that can be like an isolated correction, Steve.
Steve, are you thinking about there's like a dead end little lane that has several, I think they're 2-family and buildings there behind
Well, I mean,
companies?
Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but just looking at the site plan and the ownership of the lot partitions, we could see whether there needs the including rear lot lines in this change language is necessary or useful.
Maybe that's
As Maria said, it's easier to look at a plan than all these words in that situation.
I am going to interrupt, and that is in the NMU district, there are a lot of rear lot lines, as you noted, Steve.
Today, but will they still exist once the parcels have been assembled?
Well, they exist now, and the question is, what do you do? You don't know what the parcel assembly will be, and you can't assume that you'll have lots running from street to street, and that concern is what drove some of these amendments.
Right, and I think that what we can discuss with town council, and not to put town council on the spot tonight, but if the overlay were to be silent in that regard, in regard to rear yard setbacks, I would argue that the baseline zoning would rule. But I obviously don't want to make that assumption, Dick. So I'm really sincerely glad that you brought that up, and not debating, but I think that we do have time to isolate that question and return to it as a supplemental amendment because we're early in the planning board series of hearings.
Can I ask Meredith, you mentioned that the moderator has to rule on some aspect of that edited paragraph. is it the fact that the underlying zoning would be referenced as potentially being out of scope? What aspect of that? So I'm wondering if we just we don't want to accept that revision yet because it's not finalized, similar to what we did earlier. But what's your understanding of what decision needs to be made there?
I'm not a lawyer or experienced as a town meeting moderator, but I think to your point, the question about the references to the base zoning and then also the extent to which we can apply the ability to reduce by special permit with
Okay,
this new language.
being stricter.
Yep.
Okay.
But why couldn't you add side, you go back up, side yard and rear yard setbacks to that?
We could, we could simply do that. I
You
just
need to check.
yeah, I just want to be careful and not do, things on the fly and then there's like, an amendment to an amendment. But I'm taking all of these suggestions seriously. And obviously we did this really in a short period of time. That's just why I don't want to waste your time discussing it too much, but I do understand your point.
Right. Meredith, I would suggest that you mark that as not an accepted friendly amendment while we're still sort of working it out.
Okay.
Because just to clarify what the vote will be on.
Okay.
Is
And then
is
yeah.
the moderator Neil Washinsky aware that he's going to be looking at this, or that was a new edit today that you just identified?
He is aware that we're discussing it. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he is.
And then final proposed amendment to the setbacks table. There had also been a concern expressed, particularly contemplating a scenario where some of those 2-3 family properties, those brick buildings on the northern section of the study area, if one of those, like on the northernmost point, was not assembled, concerns about the potential setback between that existing 2-3 family and a much larger redevelopment under the zoning. So currently we have the minimum setback as 5 feet, can be reduced by special permit. And so Dick had recommended a minimum 20-foot setback from existing properties in the T6. I think we're also at this point not inclined to adopt that amendment, but I'm certainly open to the planning board's feedback about whether or not you think you have a similar concern and we should reconsider that.
Meredith, where is that is that located between Tully and Holly, those residential buildings that are accessed off of Heath Street? Is that the issue here?
On the other side.
No, it's off of Hammond and
It would help to see where these are.
Yeah, thank you.
yes. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing screen so you don't have to watch me flip through my slide deck. Okay. Okay, so this is regarding this portion of the study area and the
portion?
setback requirement here. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
So the concern and the scenario that Dick is thinking about is that, what happens if they assemble this property and you have this one property that's not part of a redevelopment, and Dick is concerned about having adequate setbacks from here, the new
But
development.
Doesn't that also apply to the kind of granularity in the area between Sheath and either Heath Street or Sheath and Route 9? There are several, I know some of them are assembled, but there's at least one outlier between Sheath and Route 9. And then there's, quite a few buildings that are between Heath Street and Sheath that aren't assembled yet. So that would be a situation as well. And then you have those 3 properties that are kind of, I'm going to call them in holdings within the growth companies' properties, it doesn't seem like they'd be able to move forward without additional assembly. So maybe that limits the issue. But
Yeah.
if they captured two of the three, you might have an outlier there that would need some protection. And with that, I think this is getting back to the comment of Marie. Does that revert to the underlying zoning in terms of setbacks?
I just want to point out one thing, because you hopped over to the Sheep Street side, Blair, all of those, even though you see single and two family homes, those are
Yeah.
like multi-family districts. So they
Right, I
actually, yeah, so they're kind of outliers even in the base zoning. And another thing that people might not realize is that you do have general business districts abutting two-family districts, whether it's that NMU section or the TOM section in the base zoning. And general business districts have 0 side setbacks to T districts. So actually, what the zoning that is in place in the select board's warrant article would actually improve that situation regarding side yard setbacks.
I see.
But
Good.
0 now, the warrant
Mhm.
article proposes 5 uniformly. For these conditions that we're just talking about, where there's potentially a parcel not assembled. The friendly amendment proposed was 20 feet, but we're staying with 5 feet, which is better than 0 feet.
In this portion of the.
Yeah.
The zoning in that TOM district proposed a 5-foot setback along that entire northern line. The T6 zoning in that area has 20-foot side yard setbacks. So you can see that WS Development owns 2 of those properties. I believe that a 20-foot setback would apply there, and just as a matter of law, rather than a 5-foot setback. But this would clarify that. If you develop the green but not the gray, 2-family buildings.
So no matter what we say 5 feet, you think that legally there's still the case to be made for something bigger?
I believe so. I believe so. But because they are part of a T6 zone now, and the only setback rezoning or setback changes in the warrant articles are on the perimeters of these zones. There's nothing in the warrant article that changes setbacks on interior lot lines. So I believe by default, the existing side yard and rear yard setbacks would apply.
Meredith, could you maybe go back to your table again? Because
Mhm.
just to remind everybody what it said.
So the example we were just talking about relates to this part of the.
Yeah, it's the northernmost border, which that northernmost line essentially abuts undeveloped land in Newton rather than actual dwelling units. And I don't have any problem with that 5-foot or even 0-foot setback there. But once you're abutting existing residences, I think, and putting in a 75-foot high or 88-foot high building, or even a 75-foot high building, I think a 5-foot or even less setback is unreasonable.
Right, but just keep in mind that the whole district would be rezoned. And that's like really the point of the overlay. It is changing the zoning, whether it's G or T. and treating it in a more uniform manner, because it really doesn't make sense to have these 2 or 3 outliers. And furthermore, it almost necessitates assemblage.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It seems like
Yeah,
it encourages the parcels to be combined, which I would think is a good thing.
no,
Context.
Unless you
certainly
live there.
they could certainly be assembled, but nothing compels individuals to sell, and you don't know what is going to happen, and it is not under common ownership at this point. I've made the point that that there are existing residences, and I think that you treat them, in my view, different. You should treat them differently than commercial areas or vacant land.
I think what's useful about your proposed amendment, Dick, is that we are willing to consider applying the side and rear setbacks for the base zoning for those particular situations. There would be design review with a special permit, which is discretionary, and there is some latitude to adjust them should there not be the assemblage, and there would be, if those 2-family house scale district structures remaining. So it might not be an ideal situation for an abutter, but there is a great deal of latitude, especially if we're going to revert to the baseline zoning with your proposed amendment.
We can discuss this further.
Meredith, are there further edits?
There are a few more. I will try to move through these very quickly. Dick caught a very helpful Scrivener's error here. That would certainly be a friendly amendment we'd be receptive to. And in section 13 regarding vehicular circulation, again, coming back to sort of the main concerns from the neighborhood perspective, we had included in the zoning, it's reiterated in the City Realty MOA, that there are no new curb cuts allowed on Heath Street, and that we would only be permitted for emergency vehicle access. So Dick had suggested that this restriction also be applied to the East Block in the CHC4. We're willing to, this striking no new curb cut and just saying no curb cut, that is perfectly fine. Happy to adopt that as a friendly amendment. We're not inclined to include the East Block in this vehicular access restriction, just given sort of the different nature in terms of existing access to Heath Street on the East Block versus the West Block. And then over the course of, the 20 plus community advisory group meetings, the focus had really been on the restricting vehicular access, closest to the residential areas on the western edge. There really had not been discussion or advocacy for a similar restriction on the East Block, 1. And then 2, we just talked about a very, a scope of proposals that we had made to accommodate growth companies. And I'm assuming that they would certainly consider restrictions in terms of curb cuts on Heath Street for any development on their properties to be a major obstacle in the feasibility of redeveloping and utilizing this overlay zoning.
Meredith, but there's already existing curb cuts there along the East Block. So wouldn't they, they wouldn't be extinguished by the overlay. They would be available, wouldn't they? I'm just.
Well, so Blair, I guess in that case, if you were in favor of applying the restriction to the East Block, then
No,
we
I'm
should
not.
leave it as
I'm
no
not.
new curb cut.
I'm not, but I think there's existing curb cuts there. I think there is at least
This is
3.
just
along
referring to
there.
the West Block.
Right, I understand that. I think the West Block is the issue. The East Block has a number of curb cuts, and there's nothing that says that they would be unable to continue to use those, in my mind.
Right, but that's the idea, that on the East Block, not a problem to use them. Come on and off East Street all you want. On the west side, don't come off onto East Street.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the exception to that was that on the West Block, they would be allowed to have a curb cut for emergency vehicles only.
Right.
So that would, I think that's pretty important, isn't it, in terms of the current proposal?
Yep, that's that last line.
May,
Dick, go ahead.
thank you. Thank you very much. I actually was astounded that there was nothing in the zoning with regard to the east block of the CHC4 district. There are curb cuts there, but they essentially serve some small residential properties. And my concern is that, and not something that would affect me directly, but that those exits, those curb cuts could be used as exits for the entire CH4 East property, unless there was some sort of limitation put on it. There is a significant difference between having a few small residences or small businesses exit and potentially allowing the entire development to exit from that onto Heath Street. And thinking about it in practical terms, if I were in the East Block and I wanted to go west or north or south, what I would do would be to exit onto Heath Street and go west on Heath Street to Hammond Pond Parkway. I'd go through the residential neighborhood, and then I could go north or south on Hammond Pond Parkway. I could go right on Hammond Pond Parkway and get onto Route 9 heading west if I wanted to go west. There could be, I think, a massive amount of traffic that would use this exit. And what I suggested to the planning department would be, is there some way to put a limit on it, to say, look, if there is some development on the Heath Street side, maybe that can exit onto Heath Street, but you can't use that Heath Street curb cut or the curb cuts as a place to exit traffic from that entire large block of development. And I leave it at that.
Can I comment about that, since I met with growth companies twice on this? And I think
Sure,
it does speak to this, which is that they had a proposal that they wanted to have the overlay zoning allow, which was to put I'm not sure if it was 5, 6, or so story residential building along that Heath Street edge. And I'm not sure how to address your important point, Dick, but they were presumably just wanting that building to be able to have a residential egress and access onto Heath Street. But your point that you're bringing up is, what's to stop them from taking all their commercial spaces that are currently accessed off of Boylston Street? I think one actually has an access off of Tully Street, and be able to dump all that traffic onto Heath Street, which would be undesirable. So I think your point is well taken. And I'm not sure how we amend this so that we allow the former, but eliminate the possibility of that becoming a overall exit from all their properties.
Just so I'm clear, we're talking about the same block. This is right now where the Exo Sushi is, which has a connection to
No.
9
Other
and
end.
Heath.
This is the area that's near Tully. Maybe if Meredith could put up the zoning overlay.
Yep.
Okay, if you
So
look at just above CHC4 on the east of Tully Street, you see there's a number of, I think there are 2 and 3 family buildings there, some of which are owned by the growth companies. The proposal that they spoke with George Cole and myself and Janice Kahn about was that they would, in order to develop their lot that's on Tully Street, they would need to move all that parking that's over there into their main area. And so what they were proposing to do would be to build a residential building first that butts onto Heath Street, and then have their parking behind that. And the whole issue of the parking that would be for commercial uses, right now, the existing condition is it exits onto Tully Street. And I presume it was never, really specified where that traffic was going to go, but I presumed it was utilizing the existing access points off of Tully and off of Boylston Street for the new garage.
Just
Am
so
I being
I'm
clear?
clear, no curb cuts on Heath doesn't mean you can't have a curb cut on Tully and then turn right and go to Heath, correct?
That's correct, because there is already existing
Yeah.
curb cuts there. And as there are existing curb cuts along Heath Street just above the CHC-4. And the question is, can we limit in some fashion, within the current friendly amendments that, the access for a new residential building could be onto Heath, but general access for all the other commercial uses would not be allowed onto Heath.
I'm not sure why they couldn't just have their residential building egress onto Tully.
They may, and I just, they didn't come up with an
No.
actual proposal there. They
No.
had just come up with, in terms of the access, they were just importantly speaking about the possibility of different uses and different phasing of their development.
Yeah, it's going to go to Steve. Sounds like an architect problem, not a zoning problem.
Actually, it's not. I have a procedural question. I'm here, obviously as a member of the planning board, but I'm also the planning board's representative to the Housing Advisory Board, and there are 5 other members of the HAB attending this meeting. And I think we're, with all due respect, we're getting deep into some weeds here. And I'm wondering, since it's already over an hour and a half that we've been talking about this, if we could defer, maybe put this on pause for a little bit and deal with the Housing Advisory Board aspect of this. I don't know if Emily is prepared to kind of present what the matters pertaining to the Housing Advisory Board might be, the inclusionary zoning aspects of this, and then get back to and perhaps continue this zoning discussion.
My understanding is we're doing the planning board is going to vote on this warrant article,
Mhm.
joint hearing, and then the HAB will have their opportunity to discuss and vote on this and other articles.
Right. I'm just wondering how long we're going to go before the HAB.
So, Meredith, it looked like you were almost done with the friendly amendments portion. So, did we hit all of them?
Yep, and then there were also the tree canopy requirements, which we've already touched upon.
Okay. So there's nothing left. Maria, so you're about to say something. Anything else for staff to present to the planning board prior to our discussion, public comment, and a vote?
Nothing critical, no.
Okay. So then I will,
No,
at that point, then flip to the members of the planning board. Any questions or comments on what you've heard tonight? Again, we're going to have public comment that may go on for a while prior to us voting, but I assume we want to get that part done before we move on to other topics. Tell me if you feel strongly another way, but I'll go to Tommy. You have your hand up, and then we'll.
Yeah. Sorry, I keep putting my hand up and putting it down, kind of about this curb cut issue, because the thing that keeps jumping into my mind just on that specific topic is there's still some prospective changes to traffic flow in the area. And it feels a little bit like putting the cart before the horse to try to predict what the traffic flow in the area will look like, when we're also saying we will deal with that on the back end during the design review process and having to work together with Newton and the Commonwealth on Route 9. So that's all I've got on that specific thing, and I can hold anything for.
Yeah, I just want to
later.
quickly add to that, there's a whole bunch of things that the transportation division can do. They can say, no right turn. There are a lot of, they can make certain roads one way. So it's really, there's a lot that we would depend on the transportation division to do to avoid some of the important issues that Dick has raised.
Yeah, it feels really granular right now.
Can I add to that? 'Cause I'm glad Tommy brought that up. I'm just wondering, like when does that happen? That
What-
transportation coordination with Newton and like how is that? Do we wait until projects are built and then deal with it, or how does that work?
Andrew, okay, so you're asking, we're moving on from the Heath Street vehicular connection and talking about the memo that we forwarded
Yeah.
regarding the transportation. Okay, so it is a great question. I think the timeline is uncertain, but I don't think we would wait. So, you know, if the zoning passes, there's sort of an additional sense of urgency for us to really try to partner more closely with Mass DOT and City of Newton to advance some of the multimodal safety improvements that we've identified. So, you know, we'd love to establish a working group with Newton. We've got to figure out how to engage Mass DOT. I think if the zoning passes, they might take those discussions a little bit more seriously. You know, ultimately, we'd like to be able to work on trying to do some more, you know, refine the conceptual plans. And then as things are redeveloped and we have mitigation funds available for infrastructure improvements, we'll be better positioned to implement those and kind of have a stated plan that is in coordination with Mass DOT and Newton. So it's not a specific answer, but I think process-wise, that's how things will move ahead.
Yeah, and I appreciate, all the previous studies and reports that have been done, that it's being discussed and thought about.
Just to go back to what Tommy said, the no curb cut on Heath Street was part of that 2-year process with the town and the neighbors, right? That was sort of an impact we're trying to mitigate to the neighbors living sort of on the south side of this property, correct?
On the west.
West side.
Yeah. And so is there a special permit option should we find that there is a reason why it doesn't work for a specific building proposal, which we do not have yet, or that because it's in zoning, that's set and there is nothing that can be done about it?
So you're doing site plan and design review. And think about
Correct,
what you
yep.
do with section 509. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing's off the table. And you could see with the design guidelines, site circulation is a huge part of what you do with design review. It's not just looking at the building. So all of this gets into, you have testimony from all relevant departments, from health, fire, building, transportation, engineering, and all of that goes into the decisions that you make in a recommendation to the Board of Appeals, which again, this is a discretionary permit. So these projects don't even have to be approved. There is the option to deny them. But that's certainly within the realm. Section 509 makes it very clear all of these aspects that you're looking at regarding site circulation.
Okay, so the zoning basically codifies the priorities of the town and by extension, the neighbors, but we're not going to be unreasonable if there's a specific reason to do something, right?
Absolutely,
The project
because
review.
you can even go so far and do what we do with 40Bs. We have a third-party transportation consultant that's brought on board, and that is subject to Chapter 44, Section 53G, where the applicant assumes the costs for that independent transit review to help you understand how the structural engineering plays into structured parking, site circulation, where curb cuts are advised. And I invite anyone to come to even like a 40B hearing where we look at, do curb cuts belong here? Do they belong on Harvard Street and not a side street? All of that is up for review.
Thank you for that clarification. Mark or Linda, do either of you have anything to ask or add?
No. I'm good. I want to see how it all sets out with these friendlies and unfriendlies, which I didn't get to see this afternoon.
And just before we go to public comment, so the friendly amendments that are in the document that Meredith just reviewed that are not highlighted and striked through, if we vote tonight, you're comfortable with those having been incorporated in the language we vote on? You can
I
just,
thought we were going to wait on those.
Yes.
Well, there are some we're waiting on, but there are others that
Yeah, the
were
Scribner's
accepted.
business, but yeah, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if it's just the little bits, that's fine.
So I want to make sure we're sort of minimizing how much
Yeah.
has to follow our vote in terms
Yeah.
of refinement and further
What are
discussion.
what are we commenting on now, Matt?
So I'm hoping that we're looking at the as submitted warrant article with the friendly amendments that Meredith just took us through. That's the subject that I'm hoping we're gonna have a motion to vote on after public comment.
Yeah, I guess as I guess we're at the point of great rationalization right now. I being a member of the committee, I've already expressed my opinion to the select board that I wasn't in favor of going forward with this amendment at this time. Basically, I'm not opposed to it, and I don't want to disrespect all the work that's gone into it, but I can't vote for it. So I'll probably just recuse myself. Essentially, during the course of the time that we discussed this project of rezoning at the committee level, there was really no discussion of what successful ground floor commercial would be. It was basically a discussion related to how can we financially build this and how can we get 60% of the commercial area built, and it basically filtered down to the intensity of housing being developed in order to fund it, the lack of parking and actually accessibility to whatever type of commercial space would be developed, transportation issues. How do people get there? Who would use it? With all this commercial space, is it just for the people who are living there, or is it supposed to be something like a Brookline Village or a Harvard Street type of commercial use? Basically, we didn't talk about cultural or urban context quality. We were essentially evaluating a proposal for one parcel of land. There was this idea that why wouldn't the whole frontage along Heath Street, for example, be treated in a similar fashion as the MNUs, and then maybe split, the 4.0 district down the middle. There wasn't any discussion about that because the development that was suggested was more of a proposal. Basically, I don't think that the development that we think we're going to get from a singularity of zoning is going to be contribute to urban development or quality in that particular area, of the town. With regard to building heights, vehicle circulation, we've already talked about that. Parking, everybody has their issues about the fact that there's nothing unique that's been developed for the commercial spaces at all. There's nothing in the context of the urbanality and build out, and it's left to us to essentially do site design or site approval or site review. It's not going to happen that way. Essentially, it's a housing-based development for financial feasibility. It's really not anything that really looks at successful commercial area. So, I mean, we didn't look at any smart use. We didn't look at multi-zone parcels. We didn't look at a lot of things. And so I think it's not ready for prime time. And in my opinion, it needs more work and it needs more review from the committee, and it needs more input along the lines of a more complex development than what it seems to be. But like I said, everybody has done a lot of work on this, and technically, you can't really argue about the zoning bylaw that is put together for it. So you can't really say that, well, it's a poor this or a poor that, but it's not, this didn't look at all the aspects of what could happen because halfway through we were waylaid by the idea of trying to look at a development proposal. So that's my opinion, and I'm not saying that these things are not insurmountable, and I'm not saying that the financial feasibilities that have been discovered and the things that have been said by specialists are wrong. I'm just saying that there's more to it than what we see before us, and it needs to continue. That's my opinion.
All right, appreciate that. Obviously, this was on the 2005 master plan. We've had decades to get this far, and to your point, two years of effort for those things to have come up, and some didn't. That's perfectly fair. It is prime time. This is a warrant article. It's going to be voted on tonight, and then hopefully town meeting will have their chance at it in a couple of months. But yeah, no process is going to be perfect. We should do a download or a debrief at the end of this about how the process might improve for the next one. We still have, as Meredith showed us, 2 other fairly large parcels that will likely go through some kind of similar process. So what we can learn from this one, I think we can apply to the next. But
I think you're right. That's a great rationalization that you just made.
all right, so if everyone on the planning board is comfortable, I'm going to just quickly, we're going to open up for public comment. And again, what we'd like is comments around the as submitted warrant article with the amendments that Meredith has gone through tonight. We have other proposed amendments that came in through Janice Kahn's group. We haven't had a chance to digest those yet, so those would likely be a good topic for the upcoming hearing. That doesn't mean you can't talk about them, but we can't vote on those tonight. We just haven't had the time to prepare. And Dick, if you'd like to make your case for any of the other amendments, same thing, you're welcome to share those tonight, or we can specifically pick those up at the next hearing on the 30th, assuming that you'd have some more time, perhaps with staff, to talk those through.
Well, thank you. From what I heard, your plan is simply to vote on the warrant article as filed with the friendly amendments tonight, and we'll be circling back to the other ones in the future. So it's late already, and I'll hold off unless the spirit moves me on the ones that we've been discussing.
All right, we appreciate that. Thank you. All right, if you are interested in making a comment or asking a question, please use the react button at the bottom of the screen and raise your hand so that staff can promote you. And then hopefully we can have you ask your question through video. Jane Flanagan's hand went up first.
Hi. Sorry, I am in my car, so you can, sorry, I'm in my car, so I'm sorry that I'm in such a strange place. But anyway, that being said, I am Jane Flanagan. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 15, and I was on the Chestnut Hill Advisory Committee. And I really appreciate the comments that both Dick Benka and Mike Cirillo have brought up, because I do think it speaks to we really didn't talk too much about the rest of the zoning. So I think that's very fair to say. And it would be good to be able to continue to have some sort of a dialogue there. But the reason I really wanted to speak tonight was, I know you have not had a chance to digest it or even probably read it, but I do agree with Janice Kahn's consensus plan that has taken quite a bit of work in dealing with neighbors and dealing with town meeting members and dealing with the developer. And I just want to say that I'm speaking in favor of that. I know you're not taking that up tonight from what I just heard, but I did want to say that. I also am very pleased to hear that you're talking about coordinating with the Brookline officials, Newton officials, and MassDOT officials around the traffic. And that is definitely something that has come loud and clear from all members, the town meeting members, as well as the neighborhood, to say that this really needs to be looked at. So I really appreciate your comments. I don't need to speak any longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate that. Next hand us up was Councilor Baker.
See if I can unmute. Thank you very much. I'm Lyle Baker. I'm a city councilor in Newton, and my ward abuts the site. And I'm also chairman of the Zoning and Planning Committee, but I'm speaking in an individual capacity as a counselor. I've tried to follow this, and your town administrator and was gracious enough to attend a meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee in Newton a few weeks ago to talk about this, and we also met with the mayor. The issue that I would urge you to consider, which is the timing of the conversation around the traffic flow. There's a good deal of concern about the R-cut solution for Hammond Street and Route 9 as whether that's actually going to work. And given the transportation consultant's estimate of what the build out would be, it seems to be the solution that has risen to the top in order to make the project work. So I think it's really important to try and figure that out before the vote of town meeting if possible, because then if it doesn't work, then you've made a decision about rezoning without an adequate transportation substructure. So that's a timing question, but also a policy one. Boston College has a lot of access back and forth through that, as well as Chestnut Hill Avenue. There are institutions like the churches and the schools north of Hammond Street, as well as residents who are going to be affected by that particular innovation, which I've never seen done, although as far as I know, the Transportation Committee had not seen one either, even though the transportation consultant recommended it. So I would just say that there is some skepticism echoed by our mayor about that particular solution. And if everything in terms of traffic mitigation hangs on it, I think it's important to get that sorted out before you make a vote. So that's my comment. And I thank you for the one other thing I would urge you to consider, just taking out the Chestnut Hill part north of Route 9, simply because Newton depended on the parking that Star Market has in the area there as part of a special permit we granted for the expansion of the market some time ago. And given the street's opposition, I think that also reduces some of the traffic demand if you take that out and preserve the area the way it is. You've still got an opportunity to come back at a later time and do the same thing or something different. But I think the opportunity here is to go forward on the areas that make sense, but not include the parts that seem to be not essential, but may pose problems for you down the road. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Council Baker. Appreciate you joining us tonight. Next hand I saw go up was Carla Benka.
Thank you. I'm Carla Benka, town meeting member from Precinct 14 and a member of the Community Advisory Group of the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study. And I'm going to be touching on a couple of the points that Councilman Baker just made. I'd like to make 2 points this evening. The first has to do with the increased vehicular traffic on Route 9 and the surrounding area that will result from a built-out commercial district. Interestingly, lessening congestion of traffic, in quotes, is a specific purpose of zoning as articulated in the town zoning bylaw. But to date, when the issue of traffic has come up at public meetings and hearings, the response has been that intersection designs will be determined in the future or that traffic issues will be addressed down the road when the staff from Brookline, Newton, and Mass DOT get together. Outside of possible traffic signal improvements and preventing existing north-south movements on Hammond Street, creating diversions and U-turns on Route 9 at Tully Street and Dunster Road as a result of that prohibition, no other detailed efforts for vehicular traffic mitigation have been publicly offered. And yet Kittleson and Associates, the town's traffic consultant using a 20-year horizon, projects a 342% increase in morning peak hour trips and a 399% increase in evening peak hour trips, resulting from a full build-out of redevelopment parcels. Approving the zoning now and figuring out what to do about the increase in vehicular traffic later does not sound like sensible planning to me. And my second point has to do with the transit-oriented mixed use, or TOM, T-O-M, subdistrict north of Route 9 that encompasses the CVS site, adjacent gas pumps, a large parking lot for CVS, Shaw's, and the street, and 4 residential properties. And you've talked a little bit about those this evening. Owners in this subdistrict have said they have no plans to sell or redevelop their properties, some of which have long-term leases with their tenants. And the town administrator, as Councilman Baker just said, in a meeting with Newton officials, has stated that Brookline has no intention of disturbing the existing parking facility in Brookline that serves the Star Market and the other nearby businesses in Newton. So why should town meeting consider rezoning this piece of the Chestnut Hill commercial area now? Given the significant increases in traffic anticipated from what will be permitted to be built in the area south of Route 9, why not defer the inclusion of this sub-district north of Route 9 until such time as relevant property owners signal their intent to sell or redevelop, or until effective traffic mitigation plans, particularly with respect to the intersection of Route 9 and Hammond Street, materialize? Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. I appreciate your comments. Next hand I saw was Stephanie and then Gregory.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Walker. I live at 725 Heath Street. My husband will speak after me, neighbors that have been heavily involved in the process from the beginning. And so the first thing I'd like to just say is thank you to Mark Zarillo for his comments, because I think they very much accurately represent the process that felt all along sort of not ideal to many of us in the neighborhood. We have from day one, despite much news to the contrary, not opposed development at this site. We very much are in favor of that. We see the need for the tax revenue. We see the need to have more lively, vibrant area in our neighborhood. So we're not opposed to that. And I just want to say that I think Mark accurately captured the thought of the process sort of being disrupted partway through with the focus on a singular development, a site, and not really looking comprehensively at the whole area. And that was very frustrating. I'm an academic, and when we teach, we talk about creating courses that through a process called backwards design, where you think about your learning outcomes and what you really want at the end, and you work backwards to kind of structure everything leading towards that. And this felt like the complete opposite of that. Despite all of that, we are where we are, as you've said tonight. And I think one of the things that Jane brought up was a consensus amendment that has been brought forth by Janice. I know you're not going to discuss and hopefully be able to attend the meeting where you do. But I feel pretty strongly that that consensus amendment still doesn't necessarily capture much of the neighborhood's desires, but it is one in which we are willing to support because we feel, again, we don't want to thwart the development process. We understand the need to move this forward, and we feel like we have made some concessions and we're willing to make some concessions there. So my ask, I guess, is that you seriously consider that consensus amendment, view it as something that has come out of a lot of conversation with our representative town meeting members and the neighborhood to come to something that we feel would be acceptable, both from the kind of concerns we had about traffic and density and height, but also would bring forward things that we think are really positive for the potential development that could occur there. So that's all I want to say. And I also want to just say thank you to Carla for very articulately addressing some of the traffic concerns. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. And yes, we do want to have time to actually digest and understand and get input from staff on those recommendations. So that'll give us the time and space to do that for sure. Gregory.
Thanks so much. Oops.
There you go.
Sorry. Thanks. I just mostly want to echo, I think, what Stephanie just very articulately summarized. And really, again, just thank Jane, Carla, Mark, and also Councilor Baker from Newton, who I think really articulated some of the concerns that the neighborhood has been kind of consistently trying to raise over the last kind of 2-year process. And regarding some of the traffic and this kind of more holistic consideration of the, of the development plan for the entire area. I think, again, wanted to maybe again emphasize the goal of really focusing on generating kind of commercial tax revenue as kind of really the sort of initial goal for this process as it was laid out. And I think there have been times where that's been somewhat has maybe the focus of this process has kind of lost kind of the original intent of the Chestnut Hill commercial area to generate that tax revenue to support the town. And that's, again, something that the neighborhood has really been looking to really work with the town and compromise on. I think that, again, I just wanted to sort of, again, voice my support for the amendment that Janice has put forward. And I, again, acknowledge that that hasn't been reviewed today. But I think maybe also really acknowledge City Realty for reaching out to the neighborhood and really working on a compromise towards the end of the process. And, I think just maybe a comment on the process that, one of the reasons that there is this kind of last minute flurry of information coming to the board, I think really does reflect the process and certainly the perspective of the neighborhood of, while we've been invited to very many meetings, not always really feeling heard or that our views were represented in the final proposal. And so, it was really a last minute meeting in the neighborhood. And really, again, thanks to Jane, Janice, and Carla and some of the other town meeting members for really educating us on the process and the fact that the way to have our voice heard was to submit these consensus amendments that Jane has really done on behalf of the neighborhood. So again, I think we understand that the process is to vote on the proposal that's in front of you, but I think really encourage the committee to review those amendments in the MOA as we go forward.
Great. Thank you, Gregory. Appreciate your comments. George Cole, you're next.
Hi, my name's George Cole. I'm a member of the Economic Development Advisory Board and chair of the subcommittee of the EDAB that was looking at this rezoning proposal. I want to go back to the big picture, which is really the town is desperately needing additional tax revenues. This is a unique opportunity in terms of its scale and adjacency to major transportation venues. And we assessed, our subcommittee assessed the financial feasibility of many development scenarios. And the current warrant article is a result of all that financial analysis that we've done, the developer's done, the town has done. And what you see before you is a whole set of compromises by the town, by the neighborhood, by the developer, but it represents our best guess as to what is a feasible development, what can be done here, and what will benefit the overall town and the neighborhood. There's still lots of problems to be resolved when specific development proposals come before us, but this is the town's best opportunity right now to generate additional tax revenues and provide significant additional new housing. So on behalf of EDAB and my subcommittee, we urge the planning board to endorse this warrant article. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I don't see other hands, so just another call if anyone, and now I do. Alex, oh no, there's a thumbs up, sorry. Just flipping through to see if there's any other hands going up. All right, seeing none.
May I make a comment just to build on what Jane Flanagan and some of the members in the community had said, because I want to emphasize that the neighborhood does support this reluctantly. We think it's too high, yet we see the urgency for the revenue that town gets, the payment to the housing trust funds, and the ask, which you will be hearing when you get a chance to read it, I don't think is gigantic. It's just basically having the base zoning being less than what is currently being proposed. And so I do hope that you all have a chance to read it and that you would vote favorably on that. I think there's been a lot asked for this neighborhood in terms of seeing development that's nearly 3 times the height of what's the existing zoning is. It's over twice the height of anything that's close by. So I think the neighborhood coming along with this is really based on our affinity to the town's larger goals, not to what's in our own personal best interest. And it has been a very frustrating process. I think that there wasn't enough time thinking about the whole, but this is what we have. And so I just want to say that let's move forward.
Great, appreciate that, Blair. I just have two follow-ups for Maria and or Meredith. One, just remind us again what the next steps are for traffic as part, assuming this passes town meeting. The next step for looking at traffic is part of a specific development or not necessarily, it's a more general look.
I would say it's a more general look. We'd like to really start trying to make more headway on coordinating with Newton and engaging Mass DOT in the concepts that we identified in our study, a lot of which include Route 9, which is not property that we control. So like we're really going to need to engage Mass DOT and try to refine some of the concepts or modify the concepts that the town has put together and sort of doing our homework as part of this study.
That's helpful. And then the second question, as Councilor brought up, on the opposite side of the street, that parcel, is it fully controlled by WS Development with the exception of those? Who owns that now?
So I can pull up the property ownership map if that would be helpful.
No, I was curious if it was WS already who had the CVS and that portion of the parking lot.
No, so the CVS property is owned by CVS. WS owns the parking lot and a couple of the 2-3 family homes on Hammond Street.
Okay. So our understanding then is current ownership of the parking lot and a good portion of that is not motivated to develop it, but yet this is our opportunity to increase the value of those parcels by including them in this zoning. Yes?
Yes, yeah. And I think there's also the incentivize them, and they have, WS was very upfront with us at the beginning of the study process where they have no near-term redevelopment plans because redeveloping the parking lot would require modifications to their special permits with Newton and rethinking sort of the operation and function of that entire shopping center. That being said, I think having the overlay zoning, we are looking to maybe motivate them to start thinking more concretely about how they might utilize that space that would have some taxable square footage for Brookline.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Any other members of the planning board have follow-up questions from the public comment points raised? If not,
I don't have a reaction to the public comments other than, I appreciate that, some of the more immediate neighbors, have been not thrilled with the way this has gone. But actually, I do have one question perhaps for Meredith or town council. I've also looked at the MOA. I don't intend this to be a long discussion, but I was reminded of this when I looked at Meredith's photo presentation of the existing conditions and the renderings of what we might see in the future. And one thing that I was reminded of was the horrible line of telephone poles and cable and power lines and all that stuff that exists now. I remember going back years when we approved the beautiful little Schwab building. You cannot get a picture of that building without it being covered by telephone and cable wires. And in the MOA, most of which doesn't have much to do with the planning board's concern, the MOA does say that the MOA is intended to be considered by the planning board and the zoning board when we review the project. And I guess maybe that's because there are a lot of off-site potential improvements, et cetera, that are agreed to in the MOA, like buying helping to pay for a fire engine and other things off the site. And I'm wondering if any of that would include putting those utilities on those telephone poles underground. Has that been discussed? Because you don't see them in the renderings, of course. Nobody would put those in a rendering. But what's the reality of the future of that line of telephone poles?
That is a great question, Steve. I don't believe that's been talked about within the context of the items of agreement in the MOA. That's certain we can discuss that and get back to you.
Yeah, I'm not sure who would be responsible for paying for something like that, frankly. It's a little bit out of my pay grade.
I think because we haven't talked about this with DPW staff on separate occasions, and I think the responsibility would be on the property owner to coordinate with the utilities to make that change, but we can look into this and circle back with.
Certainly something to look into, I think.
Yep.
If it hasn't been. Okay, that's my only other.
Michael Riverside raised his hand. I assume you may have an answer to that?
Thank you. And thank you for the question, Steve. I just wanted to say that in some of the negotiation discussions with City Realty in particular, this question was raised. We did discuss whether or not that was possible. One of the pieces of information that we learned is that one of the effects of this construction may be, and we don't know at this point, the moving of some of those poles. As you mentioned, Steve, there is a significant cost in putting those underground, which we have not sort of in the range of public benefits that we have negotiated in the context of the MOA. We have not included that as one of the public benefits, just in terms of all of the possible trade-offs. But it was discussed as a consideration.
Thank you.
All right. I'm looking for our usual draft motion. There really isn't one in the staff memo. What I would move a motion, just correct me if I'm wrong, to recommend favorable action on Article 1 as amended and reviewed with friendly amendments tonight. Is that how we'd like to do this? That wording appropriate?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
I'm looking at Meredith.
I think,
Yes, to
I
you.
guess I'm wondering, we had this discussion at EDAB. So EDAB voted on the proposed zoning and then took a separate vote endorsing the friendly amendments as presented as of, Monday. So instead of bundling your vote regarding the zoning specific to the incomplete set of friendly amendments, maybe it would be helpful to vote just on the zoning.
Yep.
Special town meeting Article 1, and then if you felt comfortable, I did go through and have a track changes document just with the scope of the friendly amendments that we talked about.
Yeah.
So that
Do
could be
all the amendments on the 30th, the friendly and whatever is still to come from the neighborhood consensus all at one time.
I think I'm looking at Polly here. I actually think that we went through, there were a lot of Scrivener errors, and I think it would be more accurate if you voted on the warrant article with those friendly amendments. Those would be the non-yellow highlights, because that seemed pretty straightforward to me.
Okay.
Don't you agree, Polly?
I agree with that. And I also want to remind you that you also are going to be wanted to vote on the design guidelines and standards.
Yep.
I would actually, I apologize. This is Jonathan Simpson. If I'm not mistaken, Maria, the vote, if you,
Oh,
you
right.
voting
You're
on,
right. You're right. You're right.
you voting on just the Scrivener's errors, it means we now have a third version of the zoning floating around.
Yeah.
So I think that if to keep it as simple as possible, if you just want to vote on special town meeting 1, particularly since you have already basically committed to meeting again, I would just vote on what we have.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Michael's, your hand went back up.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say, however, is that, of course, the advisory committee and the select board still have yet to take this up. And the reason that EDAB voted the way that they did was both to address the concern that Jonathan raised about not having multiple versions floating around. So just to vote on the warrant article as filed, but to vote a recommendation on the amendments is actually helpful to the select board in its deliberations as to whether or not to incorporate those amendments as friendly amendments, because the select board is the body that would take up that action.
Are the amendments that the EDAB voted on the same that we saw tonight?
They are a subset of what you saw tonight, because some of the amendments from tonight just came in from Dick Bank.
Okay. All right, well, let's do that. We'll structure it as 2 votes. First vote on the warrant article as submitted, and then the second vote on the friendly amendments, whether or not we support. Let's see. Are we actually recommending approval, or are we recommending favorable action?
It's favorable action.
Okay. Planning Board recommends favorable action on special town meeting 1, Article 1, as submitted in the warrant. I don't have the date of the warrant, but the warrant for this town meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tommy. Roll call vote. And this is an order on this document. So Andrea,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Claire,
Yes.
Tommy,
Aye.
Mark,
Abstain.
and the chair votes aye. Okay. Second is Planning Board recommends favorable action on the friendly amendments reviewed during the April 9th, 2026 joint hearing of the Planning Board and the HAB. Do I have a second?
Sorry, Matt, I would recommend rather than voting favorable action, I just vote to endorse them. I believe that matches what EDAB.
Okay, well, update the language for the record, endorse. Same motion, but with the word endorse swapped in there. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tommy. I'll do the same order that's in the document. Andrea,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Claire,
Yes.
Tommy,
Aye.
Mark,
Yes.
and chair votes aye, or yes. All right,
What
those are our
about
two
the
votes.
design guidelines?
Do we
That's-
need, let's see. That's a favorable action for the design guidelines?
No.
I believe that's just approval because it's not a warrant article. That's just
Yeah.
a separate document that's subject to your approval.
All right. I'm looking
And-
for some kind of designation. Are those dated? Do we have a,
I would say as of today, of April 9th, 2026.
so I'm recommending adoption.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Planning Board recommends adoption of the design guidelines for the Chestnut Hill
And standards.
overlay district.
Excuse me, Matt,
Yeah.
I don't think you're recommending adoption. I think you are adopting because you're not recommending to another body.
That's correct.
Okay.
we're voting
How
to
do you,
adopt.
how do you make a motion to adopt?
You just did.
Approve.
Yeah.
The planning board.
Planning Board
approves
adopts
adoption.
the design guidelines for the Chestnut Hill overlay district as of April 9th, 2026.
Would,
work?
would you also like to add in language subject to town meeting approval of the overlay
Warrant.
district?
Yes, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Because we can't have design guidelines for something that doesn't exist.
Sure.
All right, so with those amendments to my horrible phraseology, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Andrea. And in order on the document, Andrea,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Tommy,
Aye.
Mark,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay. 3 up, 3 down. Now, the next part, I think we handed over to the HAB.
Okay.
Not done a joint hearing before, so help me out, those of you who have. Does Emily take over at this point as chair for the
So
HAB?
Steve is going to be
Oh,
acting as
I'll-
the chair for
Okay.
Roger Blood, who's not here tonight. Right.
Okay, so thanks, Matt, for turning it over to me with my dual hat on. I also want to thank my colleagues on the Housing Advisory Board for spending the last 2.5 hours with us. But this is a very consequential project that will, if it goes forward, basically double the funds that we have in the Affordable Housing Trust, which we've been able to leverage, into a lot of excellent projects, of which the most recent one, 42 Marion Street, is going to be breaking ground in about a month, I would say. Looks like it's finished to me. So, Emily, I don't know if you want to put something up on the screen. From what I understand, we really only need to endorse something that we've already approved. The Housing Advisory Board, our interest in this project is primarily as it relates to inclusionary zoning, and there were 2 components of that. One is a cash contribution based on the hotel condo project where a straight on-site housing component doesn't really work in that kind of project, much as we created a cash alternative for the Fisher Hill Senior Housing Project, which came with lots of services. It's a similar situation here. So there was a lot of work done by our chair, Roger Blood, and others to analyze what the appropriate value of a cash equivalent to on-site units was. And it comes out to just a little bit under $11 million. The second phase of the project, the residential project, City Realty will be providing on-site units. And we voted on the specifics of that at our meeting on December 3rd, 2025. And as far as I know, there haven't been any changes to what was then draft language. And so I guess I will turn it over to Emily. Maybe she wants to, I don't know if you have a more of a presentation, Emily, but if nothing else, if you could put up on the screen the language of the, which is part of the meeting package tonight, the Housing Advisory Board's vote from December 3rd. Do you have anything else to present or any context to add to that, Emily?
I don't have anything to present. I did write up a vote proposal. I did not get it from what you read before. I will say the cash contribution is part of Article 2, which I believe we'll be taking up at our 22nd, April 22nd meeting. This is just Article 1, if I'm correct in that. But it does, Article 1 does talk about the underlying zoning for City Realty's redevelopment, which the CHC4 subdistrict. So I have that in some proposed language. If you want to look at that, I
Okay.
can.
So you're right. Actually, we are the actual discussion of that is at the HABs meeting on April 22nd, where we deal with those specifics. So if you want to present your language for what we would be approving tonight.
Yeah. Sure. And in my language, you'll see I have some more specific things that the HAB has supported in the past, including the density, 50% affordable unit density bonus, and then the underlying zoning for.
Okay. And, also once you get that up, but, certainly want to make time for any questions or comments from other members of the Housing Advisory Board or members of the public. So here are the two votes. Just take a moment to read them. Yeah, and I certainly appreciate the fact that the planning staff incorporated the ideas that we created within the Affordable Housing Overlay District Subcommittee, which our economic development consultant, RKG, pointed out could help support projects with 50% affordable units compared to the 15% that our inclusionary zoning requires, or even the 25% in a 40B, and be economically feasible without requiring extensive town subsidies. Who knows whether the market at this moment really supports that, but a competent economic development consultant tells us that it is feasible. So that's one thing that I'm pleased to see in this zoning. And
I think the motion is been made. Is that correct? So do you want to vote on that?
But no, I do want to, I'm just commenting on this. I want to know if any members of the HAB have any questions or comments. I see Jonathan Klein's hand up, and then also certainly members of the public who've been very patient and are still with us. Jonathan, question, comment?
Sure. I either like to move or second the motion if it's on the table. So I'll move the motion that Emily has drafted. I think it's just perfect. I'd also like to comment that I really think this is a terrific a terrific zoning proposal. I am dismayed that it took us from 2005 to 2026 to get to it. And so there's really been a long time coming. But I think that the 2 years of work that has gone into this by the staff and by the committee and by many, many people throughout town, the intensive discussion that has been had about it already, the enormous benefits that will come to the town, including 250 units of housing, or nearly 250 units, $11 million to the Affordable Housing Trust, an additional, I don't remember, 15 or 19 affordable units on site, and the roughly 5 million plus in net revenue once this is built, which by my math comes out to about $400,000 a month. So every month we don't approve this and get this going is another month we've lost $400,000 in revenue. And given the override coming, which is very, I think it's important, but it's also a challenge. I think we need to do everything we can to both produce much needed housing, much needed affordable housing, revitalize this commercial district, and bring revenue to the town so that we can ease the economic challenges we have. So I think all around this is really very good. I appreciate and have heard and have listened to the concerns that the neighbors have expressed. And I think their voice is very important, but I also think we need to focus on the interests of the 63,000 residents of Brookline that will benefit from this. So, we need to balance those things, and I think that this has struck a good balance. So I'm very much in favor, and I'm proud to be able to make the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry I took so long with that. I apologize.
That was a good motion making. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Is that Bill?
Mike.
I'm sorry, Mike, sorry. Okay, well then let me do a roll call vote by where I can find you on my screen. There we go. Now the screen is different than I was just, I got Alex.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
It doesn't look like Sean O'Neill ever made it.
Dawn is here. She's just under my name.
I'm here.
Oh, you
I
are
am.
here. Okay. My goodness, I didn't see
Yes.
him on the screen. Sean, glad you were
Yes.
there. And the acting chair votes aye. So did I miss anybody?
I don't think you called on me yet, but my
Oh,
vote, yes.
Jonathan. All right, Jonathan.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's unanimous. So thank you all for your patience. I think Jonathan's comments were right on. I do feel like it's hard to see how the town could ask us to approve an override to help balance our budget and not also approve a project like this, which will generate some of the revenue we need to maintain our services.
Do we need to vote on the second one, or did we?
The second one. Can you put it back up then?
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So this is just the just drafted right now, I guess, that we endorse the friendly amendments reviewed at the Planning Board and the Housing Advisory Board joint hearing on April 9th tonight. That's a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it again.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Roll call vote. Let me start with you, Mike, since.
Aye.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
And I vote aye.
And
Carol
Carol votes yes.
Okay, Carol. All right. Is that everybody? Okay. So I think we are done with this joint hearing tonight.
Well, I would like to ask Matt, is the planning board going to take up any of the other amendments? And if so, what evening do you want to take them up?
I liked the suggestion of the 30th. You're expecting that we would still have to do something on Article 16 because it won't get.
Yes, but I don't think it will take very long.
Yeah.
And I think we can definitely continue. So you would continue this hearing.
Yep.
And on warrant Article 1 and any amendments to April 30th.
Okay, so I will it be a joint hearing again?
It will be if they want to,
Well,
why don't
do
we
I
say
have-
it's a joint hearing? If they decide they don't want a joint hearing, we will change the agenda.
Okay.
I mean, it's possible the planning board will have its own hearing on the, was it the 22nd? That we could make any
The HAB,
No.
you mean the
HAB.
HAB will have its own hearing on the 22nd?
Yeah.
Right. So if we don't get through what we need to do on the 22nd, we could be back with you on the 30th.
So let me ask this
Well, I
again.
don't know whether with warrant Article 16, the HAB is going to want to comment on that or make any kind of recommendation.
Possibly.
So that's why I say, I think we should just leave it that way. It can always be changed before then.
So despite the fact that it's a joint hearing, to continue a joint hearing, does it only take a vote of the planning board, or do we need to take a vote of
I
both?
think you just have to announce it. I don't think you really need a
Oh.
vote. Just announce that we're
I was gonna make a motion to continue, but okay, so we will continue this hearing until April 30th. This project will be added to that agenda. It is currently not on the published agenda, but that will be updated based on our conversation tonight. Article 16 is on the agenda. We'll be doing the friendly amendment evaluation of the consensus amendments proposed late this afternoon by the neighborhood. So.
And you're
Excuse me-
also
excuse me,
continuing this
Matt?
hearing to April 16th, which is next Thursday night, when you're going to be doing 2 other warrant articles. So in other words, you know, the hearing is being continued. on all-
This agenda is for a single hearing across 3 nights.
Yes, actually, the way the agenda was published, we published it for April 9th, 16th, and the 30th.
I'm looking at it. I didn't realize that that wasn't just 3 iterations, that that's a single document. Okay.
No, it's for all the warrant articles.
Okay.
Excuse me, Matt?
Yes, Michael.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to note that the full advisory committee is also taking up STM warrant articles 1 and 2, I believe, on the 30th. And I just wanted to make sure that that didn't conflict with what you are proposing to do.
Meredith comment on that. I had discussed that with Meredith and
I mean, we were meeting hopping on Tuesday night between select board and advisory. It's certainly something that staff can do. I think we just need to coordinate with the committees.
Okay.
I mean, the other alternative is that you continue the discussion of warrant Article 1 amendments to next week. And we take that first, and then we do the other 2 warrant articles that have been advertised for that night. You can do that as well.
I think that makes sense, because then on the 30th, assuming some more amendments are adopted, on the 30th, the AC will have that full document as hopefully voted by this group.
And if Meredith feels that by next week, you know, things can be ironed out with the amendments, then that would work.
If she did everything she did today with Dick's amendments, I gotta think a week is a good amount of time to at least get started on those other ones. Obviously, if there are a couple of sticking points, we can continue further if we have to, but let's try. I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Can I just ask a point of information? I apologize. Is the consensus or the so-called consensus amendment, I'm not sure who it represents a consensus of, something that has been posted publicly or distributed to us, or when will that be available to review? Sounds like some people have received it and reviewed it already, but I don't think the HAB has.
It was posted to the planning board agenda, and we received it at 3:30 today.
Okay.
So it will be more widely distributed, but it has to be reviewed by staff and other parties. So it could very well be revised, just pending review and discussion with Janice Kahn and her constituents.
Right. And it also needs to be converted into actual amendment language. It's drafted right now in the form of a memo.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pollack.
Just for, yes, as speaking as chair of the advisory committee's land use subcommittee that's going to be taking up special town meeting articles on Monday at 5 p.m. Both all of the recently received documents will be post it to the agenda packet for that meeting. So the documents received from Janice Kahn this afternoon, the Benka amendments, which I only found out about at your meeting tonight. But at any rate, we'll put them all in our packet. I'm not sure what and how we'll be able to deal with them on Monday, but they will all be publicly posted.
And Polly, we're going to hold off on the combined reports until the end of the hearing concludes, correct? After we go through all the amendments?
That's fine, yes.
Okay.
And just because I was late today, is the meeting on the 16th?
At 7
At
o'clock.
7. And is the one on the 30th at 7 as
At
well?
7 o'clock.
Thank you. I will update my calendar appointments.
Matt, David Pollock has his hand up.
We just spoke.
Okay, was that him? Okay.
That was about the advisory committee posting documents for their meeting on Monday. Great. Thank you all. Appreciate the time tonight. Again, sorry I was late. That was my bad. Won't let it happen again.
You did a great job.
Yeah, great.
Have a good night, everybody. See you in a week.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Bye.